Okay, if you, sorry folks, if you don't mind, I'm gonna get going. I'm gonna not probably go the entire 1 hour or 50 minutes, and we'll try to end a little bit early in case you have any questions about how you're going to be evaluated. I'm gonna take you through a couple of slides really quick, but first I wanted to welcome you all back to the semester. I hope it's a really successful one for you no matter what class you're in. And certainly in this course, I want you to be as successful as we can help you with. So I'm going to go through a lecture today with you. There are some things that I'm going to point out that I want you to make sure that you take away, but most of it is really just to give you some organization. This is a new course. We want you to give us as much feedback as you possibly can and to feel comfortable in giving us some feedback. And so I want to take you through a couple of things in today's sort of overview, a little bit about how you're going to be evaluated, what my expectations for you as a class are, how you're going to do well in this class, hopefully. And then I want to give you a big overview that we're going to go through over the next 12 and a half the next 12 and a half weeks of what human biology is. Human biology, by the way, is not easy to define. If you go and try to find a textbook on human biology, for the most part, human biology by most textbook standards are really just a form of human physiology. And I also wanted to introduce you to some of the other concepts that we think are important for you as human biology students. As you can probably tell, I'm sucking in my gut right now. I like eating. And I think most of you probably eat at least once or twice a day. As students, maybe not 3 times a day like I'm going to be doing today. But I'm hoping that we'll use eating sort of as a theme throughout this course. And eating is actually a really important, fundamental aspect of human biology. How you eat, what you eat, and what you're going to be eating in the next few years is really going to dramatically change. You may not think so, you may not be aware of what you're eating and how that's changed, but I'm going to try to take you through that in today's lecture. So again, a couple of really quick disclosures. I don't have any disclosures for you. I have no competing financial interests. Everything in this course is going to be directly from published papers, and I'll be putting them up online for you in case any of you are really interested in pursuing these. We don't want you to incur any costs outside of the coursework. This is, as I mentioned to you, the very, very first offering of HMB204. We want you to really love HMB204. We want you to love your major as human biology students. And so I do have an ulterior motive. I want you to really get invested in this topic. I want you to really like this topic. And if there's anything that either myself or the team of TAs can do for you, please don't hesitate to let us know. So when we're going through this course, it's all going to be lecture based. You will have some tutorials. I'll introduce the teaching team for you now. So we have Vanessa, and we have Zainab, Pavel. Unfortunately, Pavel likes the New England Patriots, so I don't really talk to him very much. And then we have Shana over there as well. I've been very fortunate in the sense that I've had many of them as former students, as undergrads, and I'm hoping that you'll look at that in the same way, that one day, maybe in grad school, you'll come back and TA in HMB 204 as well. So you're going to be doing group work in tutorials. How many of you love group work? I can't wait to get into a group and rely on other people to make my grade go down. You're all looking forward to that, right? I'm going to try to make this as pleasant an experience as possible. I know some of you don't like group work. To be honest, in a perfect world, I wouldn't ever collaborate with some of the other profs that are on campus either. They're not always as dependable. You have to rely on someone else. Sometimes they have other things going on. And so I know it's a hassle, but I'm hoping to convince you that group work and collaboration in this course can be fun, and it's something that will be beneficial for you. We want you to, again, have a great experience in terms of academics. We think we have a really good core material that we're going to present to you, but we also want you to do well on the assessments. And so before any of the midterms come about or the final exam, in tutorial as well as in class, we're going to try to have a review session, and in addition to that, go over some practice questions that are relevant and will be similar to the type that you get. Again, this is new, so you don't have a test bank available for you, and we want you to not be so anxious going into the midterm or into the final exam. We also want to cover topics that are relevant for you as human biology students. As I said, it's not a physiology class. It's not a cell molecular biology class. It's not a bioethics class. It's not a sociology class. It's all of those. If you're a human biology student, it means that you have to be able to understand and to be able to discuss all of those different aspects of what human biology is. So certainly we are going to cover some physiology. We're going to go through different mechanisms that are involved in physiology. We'll go through some of the cellular and molecular aspects of physiology and what it means to be in human biology. But beyond that, we also want to talk about the social impact of some of the different techniques, the technology, as well as some of the diseases that we'll be going into as well. Some of you in human biology will be asked by your parents, so should I go see a doctor, right? I know some of you might be thinking of going into med school, but already, as someone who is in the life sciences, your parents are probably going to be asking for your advice as someone who is taking a whole bunch of courses here. And I want that to be relevant for you. Your parents are going to ask you for advice, something that they've read in the newspaper, something that they've seen on the news, and I want you to be able to have a good conversation in an evidence-based way with them. So we'll talk throughout the course about new and emerging technologies, about different types of diseases, the ethical issues that accompany all of these things, as well as the overall impact of biology on human health. Some of you may know that right now, in the next few years, the biggest revolution that's going to occur in molecular and cell biology has already occurred. It occurred in 2012, and it really took off in 2013. And in 2015, it became the technique of the year. And many of you will have heard of CRISPR-Cas9. Have any of you heard of CRISPR-Cas9 in any of your other classes? This is something that will become a standard technique. Just like you know about PCR, all of you at some point before you graduate will actually hear about and potentially in some of your labs work with CRISPR-Cas9. Now, why is CRISPR-Cas9 so important? Well, CRISPR-Cas9 is important for us as human biology students because right now it's the biggest ethical debate out there. Should we, for example, actually go in and interfere with the genome? Because this is a very powerful genome editing tool. So right now in ethics, this is the biggest field in ethics and in bioethics. Should we wipe out different species of mosquitoes in order to circumvent different types of diseases? Some of you may know that my home country is actually Brazil, and in Brazil right now there is a virus that no one really understands. It's called the Zika virus that we are going to be talking about. There's a lot of discussion right now in Brazil because if you are pregnant right now, you have an increased risk of having your child have microcephaly, which means that you're born with a really small brain. You're going to have a child that is going to be developmentally delayed that you're going to have to take care of for the rest of their lives. And so right now in Brazil, because this is a mosquito-borne vector, in theory, and it's actually been done in the lab, CRISPR-Cas9 can take out the population of mosquitoes that is responsible for carrying the Zika virus. So should those individuals in Brazil wipe out that species of mosquito? This concept of a gene drive that we'll get to later in the course is really important because you will hear about it in the next few years. It's been done in the lab, but should we actually do this in the larger context of the wild? So we'll talk about different aspects of genetic, molecular, and cell biological approaches, why all of these things are important in terms of treatment and diseases, and some of the ethical issues that accompany all of these different concepts. And you'll hear about some of these in tutorial, you'll hear about some of these again in lecture. So I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes or so unpacking different elements of the course for you. If you have any questions, by the way, feel free. If you have any suggestions for how to make this a better course, also feel free to give me some feedback as well. So in terms of your assessment, we try to keep it as simple as possible. The test and final exam is going to be multiple choice as well as 1 or 2 short answers, at least for the first midterm. We know that you only have about 50 minutes to write it, so we don't want to make it crazy. So we're thinking about 25 multiple choice and 1 short answer question. You'll get an idea of the types of questions that I ask because in tutorial, you'll have the exact same format, multiple choice test questions and 1 short answer that your TAs will go over with you and mark with you as well. Your final exam will be 2 hours. It will not be cumulative. It will cover only the second half of the material that we cover in class. And hopefully by then you'll have a good idea of what the format is. Do you have any questions about this before I go on? Guys are expecting to do well on your midterm and final exam? It's not a trick question. You can say yes. Everyone's afraid to say yes. That's okay. Um, so your tutorials are going to start in the next couple of weeks. There will be a sign-up process, and you can choose which tutorial, which time you're going to. And because it involves group work, if you know other individuals in this class, I would suggest that you go together with your friends to the same tutorial room wherever possible. And again, you'll have one of the 4 TAs that are sitting here on the left side of the room. So what will happen is on Friday evening, before your Monday tutorial, you're going to have a very short 1 to 2 page article that you're going to be assigned. You'll read through that. You will discuss it with your TAs in class. And then at the end of your tutorial, where you'll get some more opportunities to ask questions, to get some more explanations from your TAs on that brief news article or brief paper, then you'll have a series of multiple choice, about 2 or 3 multiple choice test questions, and then 1 short answer. And I promise, as long as you've done your reading, that short quiz will be really easy for you. Again, your teaching assistants will provide you with some more information and to enhance whatever you've read. And part of this is just to give you some idea of how I ask multiple choice test questions and to give you some experience with that, as well as to interact with your TAs in class. So eventually in the tutorial, you're going to be doing a presentation. And I've left this really wide open. I'm going to have some topics that you're going to get with your TAs, and you can discuss with them what topics might interest you. And you're going to do a really brief write-up on it, a summary of that article that you will present as a group, so groups of about 3 or 4. And that group written article, as well as the presentation, will be based on that one paper that you've chosen. I'm not going to choose a paper for you. I'll give you broad topics, but you'll choose the topic that interests you the most in human biology, whether it's a disease process, whether it's a technology, whether it's something related to what you've heard about in class. I mentioned to you at the very outset that some of our tutorials are going to involve collaboration, some group work. I know some of you really like group work, probably not very many of you, and some of you really detest group work. Let me give you a rationale for why I want you to be involved in group work or to collaborate with people in your class. I get asked very frequently to write letters for students. I will be writing at some point down the road a letter for you. In order for me to write you a letter for graduate school or to write you a letter for summer volunteering or to get into a lab, a lot of times they will ask in this context, how does this student work well in terms of collaboration with other people, either in class or on an assignment, etc. And so I need to be able to give them an honest answer. As much as I'd like to say that student X is a fantastic student, I need to actually be able to say, well, in our course, in HMB204, we had group presentations and group write-ups, and the student performed incredibly well. And all of these different types of things that are listed here are things that you should be thinking of when you're taking different types of courses as well. So your ability to work with people, the ability to organize the efforts of others in your group, the way that you respond to other individuals in your group, all of these things are really important in grad school. They're really important if you're applying to professional schools, whether it's nursing or whether it's occupational therapy or whether it's in medicine. All of these things are ones that I want to be able to answer honestly and say that yes, this student was able to do all of this in a great way. So as this is a new course and as we're sort of trying to help you do the best that you can, I want you to think about physiology. And again, human biology is not only about physiology. In physiology, how many of you have taken PSL 300, by the way, just out of curiosity? So some of you have. If you take PSL 300, one of the things that you learn about is what's known as the step cycle of locomotion. You learn how we actually walk. And one of those things is that walking involves 2 different mechanisms, broad mechanisms. One is really about a feed forward mechanism where you anticipate what's going to happen. So if I'm walking across this stage here, then one of the things I know is that it's a nice level field. And so I don't really have to worry about what I'm going to do with the next part of my step. However, if I suddenly encountered a drop off, I have to actually use a feedback mechanism to be able to compensate for this. If I kept walking, I would have fallen. And I want you to be using both mechanisms throughout this course. I want you to be anticipating what is going to be required for you. So the quizzes will set you up for how you're going to respond on your midterm. And if you don't do well, if you don't happen to do well on a quiz, or you don't happen to do well on a test, before the final exam or before the next quiz, I want you to get some feedback how to do better, and to use these different mechanisms throughout this course, and not just in this course and in others, to do well. As I asked the TAs earlier on, I want them to be very interactive with you. Some of them have already posted their contact information, and we want you to be able to get this type of feedback mechanism. The other thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to engage in a feed-forward way, to engage in 3x3. So as soon as I'm done this section, I want you to start thinking about 3x3 in this lecture. What one point did I find really, really interesting? Whatever it is, I want you to remember that from this lecture. What point did I get really confused by in this lecture? So that's sort of the other three. And then what 3 slides should I go back and review? If you can do that for every single lecture in this course, I guarantee that you'll be able to get an A. And I guarantee that you'll be able to remember most of the lectures that you get in this course, even if some of them are incredibly boring for you. So I'm going to start now into things that I want you to make sure that you know, and I'll point out what I think are important details. I'm not here to take away marks from you, so I don't want you to be jotting down notes about different dates or about different individuals. I'm not teaching you the history of medicine. I'm here to teach you about biology and what it means to study human biology. How many of you think that right now, in the 20th century, sitting here in 2016, you are the healthiest generation of all time? No one. Not a single one of you think that you're the healthiest generation of all time. No, really. You are the healthiest generation of all time, though, right? I think we should all go out and go for a little jog, and you'll be able to see how healthy you are. I'm mentioning all of this because our definitions of what health is actually very, very different. In the early part of the 20th century, at the turn of the century, health was actually considered to be the absence of disease. If you didn't have a disease, if you didn't have something going on, you didn't have tuberculosis, you didn't have syphilis, you didn't have another form of a communicable disease, you were considered to be healthy. We now know that that is not health. That just means that you don't have a disease at that particular time. You could be sick in other ways. You could be ill in other ways. You might be feeling, for example, incredibly anxious. You might be feeling depressed and not have any other form of communicable disease. So it goes beyond sort of the physical aspect, but also into the mental and social well-being of individuals as well. And you might think that that's sort of pie in the sky. But to be honest, for you to actually study in a fruitful and meaningful way, you not only have to be physically healthy, but you have to feel connected to your class, and you also have to feel that you are feeling mentally healthy. Like if you're coming to class every single day and you're worried about whether or not you're going to be doing well, you're not going to do well. And so this idea of health being much more than sort of the physical well-being has sort of transcended our understanding of what health actually is. It is not merely the absence of disease, but it is physical, social, mental, and we'll talk about these different aspects. And it's not a new concept. This was a concept that came out in 1947. So we are now into year 4 in medicine. And again, you don't need to memorize this slide, and you don't need to memorize any of these different names. But if you were to take a look at this, what sorts of things pop out at you in era 1 versus era 2 versus era 3? Is there anything that pops out, like immediate things that you see right away? Yes, at the back. Sorry, smallpox vaccinations. Okay, so we have smallpox vaccinations. And what do you think is going on over here on this axis? The crude death rate. It keeps going up, right? Yeah, it's been going down steadily. You are living much, much longer than someone who was born in the 1800s and in the 1900s, and you are living much longer than someone who was born in my era, in the 19s, whatever. And so if you take a look, why are we entering into these different eras? Why are we living longer? Why are we not having as much disease? I'm not saying we're healthier. I'm saying that why are we not having as much disease? Some of them are elements that your colleague pointed out. And again, you don't have to memorize the different eras, the different dates, the different individuals that are involved here. But we know that changes in behavior and the changes in the way that we approach different types of diseases will eliminate different types of diseases that lead to mortality. So we are not dying as often. Our crude death rate is definitely coming down in time. We are now entering into the modern era of medicine, into the precision era of medicine, where it is completely possible that one day you will be able to do some genome editing. You might be able to eliminate other types of degenerative diseases as well. So certain things pop out. We have improved nutrition that causes an increase in health or a decrease in the death rate. We know that we have improved sanitation, being aware that different vectors will cause disease, and improving sanitation also helps. And then modern medical care, and in this era that we're in now, we know that molecular and genetic techniques will be enhancing the health as well as eliminating diseases as well. So the question goes back to, are we actually living any better now? And that's the question that you should be asking yourselves. Are we that much healthier? I would say that overall, you guys are certainly living much longer lives. And we know that changing attitudes and changing sanitation and changing all sorts of different practices lead to better survival and decreased mortality. And we know, for example, that public health practices, whether you're aware of them or not, have been incredibly powerful in changing the way in which we live, and as a result, our life expectancy. So in the 1900s, for example, before we had wide-scale vaccination and before we were vaccinated at a very early age, like all of you are before you enter into public school, the major causes of death were from infectious diseases, things like tuberculosis, pneumonia, as well as influenza. If you were to die now from pneumonia, and it certainly does happen, it would probably be unusual. It is not a common type of illness that you would encounter. The average life expectancy early on in the 1900s was about 59 for males and about 61-ish for females. So again, we're living much longer now than we were years ago. By the way, before I go on here, can you give me an example of what public health does to change your behavior to make you healthier? Anything that you can think of just off the top of your head? Yes. Hand washing signs in the bathroom, always a good sign to wash your hands before you leave the washroom. Yes. Anything else? So we haven't had a, yes. Sorry? Advertisements for? Okay, increased advertisements and public announcements about going in to get regular checkups and screenings, and certainly we'll talk a little bit about that in the next little while. So imagine you're in Brazil right now, and imagine you're pregnant. So how often do you go in for screening if, for example, you've gone out and you've gotten a mosquito bite? And how will they actually even know if you are infected with the Zika virus? So certainly public health announcements are very, very useful. And you guys have all been sort of brainwashed by public health. What do you do when you sneeze now? Yes, all of you do this. In my day, it was right into your hand, right? And that's what we were taught. But public health has changed, and we know now that germs spread. Yes, it was a long time ago, I know. But we know that changing behaviors can be easily done through those types of wide-scale announcements. So again, you don't have to worry about the numbers here. we are living much longer lives because our susceptibility to different diseases has come down. Um, and again, the gap between male and female lifespans are also decreasing as well. How long, by the way, what year were all of you born? 1990s, I'm assuming? Yes? So what's your average life expectancy? I'm not sure if I heard infinite. Don't think that's possible yet. Maybe one day. So on the whole, for males and females, it's somewhere around 80 years of age. So think about that. 60 years to 80 years, 20 years of added life because we've been able to change the way in which individuals live. So you would think we are doing an incredible job, right? We hear about how we should be avoiding spreading different types of viruses, different types of bacteria. We're doing a great job. We're certainly living 20 years longer than we were back in the 1900s, early 1900s. And so are all of these things, are all of these lifestyle changes good? Well, Canadians are certainly living a lot longer than they were before. But if we were doing that great a job, you would expect that every death rate from every type of disease that we know, because we certainly know more about diseases now than we ever did before. Certainly, we should be eliminating and decreasing the death rate for all types of diseases, right? But here are some statistics. We were doing a good job, for example, in cardiovascular disease. This is total cardiovascular disease, and again, don't memorize the numbers. Just take a look at the trends. In terms of the number of deaths in thousands by cardiovascular disease, it sort of reached a peak and then it came down. So we were getting effective in the 1980s of trying to get the message out there about cardiovascular health. But what happened here in the 2010s and in the 2000s? Why didn't it continue to go down? Can you think of a reason why? If we're really that good and we know and we understand and we can also brainwash you into being better at taking care of your health, why didn't this continue to go down? Why did it plateau? Why is it actually going back up? Why is cardiovascular disease sort of fluctuating around this number and not going down as much as we'd want? Any ideas? Yes. Could be the economy. What about the economy? Your income? But certainly, actually, our standard of income, our standard of living, our GDP has actually gone up as well. Yes, at the back. A large aging population. Okay, possible. Yes, definitely possible. And we'll come back to that as a really important health consideration when we get into week 3. Yes. The environment. So is it global warming? It is? Maybe? I don't know. Yes? Our eating habits have changed. Can I tell you that maybe in the 1970s and into the 1980s, what did people eat for breakfast? Because I was around back then, so I still remember. What did your parents eat for breakfast? Sorry, bacon? Yeah, bacon is something that's still served today, by the way. Anything else? Yes. Sorry? Margarine or trans fatty acids. Okay, let me just make sure that this is actually not going away. So for breakfast, and I still remember this and I still miss this, you used to eat steak with eggs, right? And you can imagine having this really 1-inch thick steak with fried egg on top for breakfast. And that was sort of one of the standards that we had. And certainly we did a good job of saying that we should stop eating those types of foods. And everyone is supposedly eating better. So I need a couple of volunteers. Does anyone want to volunteer? Okay. Are any of you lactose intolerant at all? Oh God, yeah? Okay. So I need a different volunteer. Yes, okay. If I could get you to, so if you were to eat this, do you think this is really healthy food? Activia, no, not healthy. Why is this not healthy? By all accounts, this is really healthy for you. Activia, no. Different brand, Danone, no. And by the way, help yourselves. I don't really do delivery service, but please help yourselves. Or how about this? If any of you are really interested and don't have a nut allergy, could I maybe interest you in a really nice dark mocha almond whole grain bar? Anyone? Isn't this nice and healthy for you? No, not healthy. Is anyone interested in a nice granola-ish bar? Whole grain. You're hungry. Okay. Well, I have lots to eat today, so please help yourself. Um, if you were to choose, by the way, between these three different drinks, and you can all take one if you wish, which one would you pick? Yeah, you're not a Coke fan. Just imagine you're a Coke fan. Regular Coke, okay. Why not the Coke Zero or the Diet Coke? Aspartame, whatever it is, the sweetener in there, not so healthy for you, you think? So it turns out that we now know in the last few years that taking in diet drinks is actually no better for you in terms of your weight loss. Diet drinks don't actually help you lose weight at all. It makes you feel like you're losing weight, and it makes you actually eat more than you should. By the way, it has no effect at all on in terms of food suppression. And we'll go back to the biology of what these different types of drinks on the hypothalamus does to your body in terms of food intake. So we are rapidly becoming a nation, not just America, Canada too. We are becoming a nation that is becoming obese or overweight. So as I told you earlier, I'm sort of standing up here and you can hear me actually sucking in my gut every once in a while. I'm perfectly healthy, right? Everyone's wondering, is he going to remember me, and does that affect my ability to get an A in this course? So I'm actually now, because of my BMI, and it may not look like it, but I am actually considered to be right on the border. I'm right on the line between being overweight to being obese. Now, I probably am no different in terms of body type than most of your parents. I'm about the same age as many of your parents. And so if you take a look, and again, you don't have to memorize these statistics, it's just to give you an idea. The number of provinces that are considered overweight and obese have actually increased, especially in the eastern part of the country. Individuals that have a certain BMI that indicates that they're overweight and obese has increased dramatically. The only place that seems to be somewhat immune to this trend of increasing obesity and being overweight happens to be British Columbia. So if you want to be nice and healthy, you move to British Columbia. You try to stay away from places like Newfoundland as well as Nova Scotia for a variety of reasons. So again, in terms of being overweight, this is a weight in relation to the body height, and we'll talk about BMI really briefly, and I know most of you know about BMI as a standard, versus obesity, where we have excessive amounts of body fat as well as adipose tissue. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about why this is important. You may not think that being fat is all that big a deal. But the fat that you accumulate and the type of fat that you accumulate actually has dramatic consequences for you. So one of the biggest issues is in human biology and in biology in general is the fact that we have now, in your era of the best sort of medicine that we have, more and more of you are going to have inflammation. And this inflammatory process, whether it's low level and you're not suffering from a bacterial infection where you'd want inflammation, you have inflammation. I have inflammation right now. I have a raised level of certain cytokines in my blood. I don't have a bacterial infection at all, but I have inflammation. And inflammation is affecting every single part of my body. It is not good for my body to experience this low level of inflammation all the time. And we'll be talking about this in the upcoming lectures. So we'll be talking a little bit about this body mass index, and you'll be hearing about this in the next lecture to come. And again, just as a review for you, as I know many of you have already learned this before, the body mass index that we'll be talking about is the standard measure of taking your body weight in kilograms and dividing it by your height in meters squared. And again, this is something I'd like you to make sure, if you haven't learned it already, something to make sure that you are familiar with. We know that it's not accurate. If you're a weightlifter, for example, your body mass index might indicate that you're overweight when in fact you're not. Another thing that we will be measuring in terms of health status is the waist circumference and the waist to hip ratio. If you have a waist and it's not sort of like this as it is on me, then you have a good waist to hip ratio. You should have something that is above 1, for example, where it becomes an issue. If you have a waist to hip ratio where it's over 1, then you're going to be considered overweight. And for women, it tends to be slightly less. If you are over the waist to hip ratio of 0.8, you're going to be considered overweight as well. Can you think of a reason why we use these measures? Not very sophisticated, right? Why do we use these? There are a couple of reasons. Let's see what reasons you guys can come up with. You're going to your doctor's office, by the way, to get all of this done. Why these measures? Yes. Cheap and easy. You don't need a lot of training to take a tape measure and put it around your waist, nor to measure your height, or to put you on a scale. So it's cheap, easy, and it's very easy to standardize across different regions of a country or between countries. To measure your percent body fat is actually difficult. In order to do this, you need specialized equipment that probably doesn't exist in your GP's office, and we'll talk about some of these different types of measurements later. Now, I'm not going to ask you to memorize all of these different values that are over here. It's to give you an idea, because we're actually going to be looking at the two extremes. We're going to be looking at two different disease processes. One where you're gaining weight, and this is the issue where you are talking about changes in behavior, and this is where you're overweight or obese, versus having cachexia. And if you have cancer, for example, you have a dramatic wasting of your body fat, and you start losing weight. And losing weight puts you at increased health risk problems at the same level as being overweight as well. So we'll talk about the two extremes where we have a body mass index of less than 18.5 versus being over 30, and what we have to be able to do in terms of standardizing the body mass index in an extreme like cancer and in cachexia versus being overweight and obese. So you should be worried about obesity. It is an increasing trend. More and more individuals in Canada are becoming obese for a variety of reasons that we'll be going through in the next week or so of lectures. And one of the biggest issues with getting obese is that other diseases follow along. I told you that you have inflammation, but in addition to that, if you are obese, you're going to be at increased risk of developing diabetes or type 2 diabetes. You're going to be at increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease when you get older. You're going to be at increased risk of cardiovascular disease. The sequela of phenomena that follows from simply being obese is actually a multitude of different types of diseases. So in other words, obesity comes at a huge health cost. So yes, we are going to be living longer. Yes, in your generation, if you were born in the 1990s, you will be living to somewhere between 80 to about 82 years of age on average. But it also means that as you get older and you encounter obesity, that you're going to be running into a number of different health issues, including things like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and if you are like me right now, you will have metabolic syndrome. And metabolic syndrome is kind of like pre-diabetes, not full-blown diabetes, but you're very, very close to the edge where your cells are still producing insulin, but the pancreatic cells still produce insulin, but the rest of your body doesn't even know that it's there. And we'll talk about that in the upcoming lecture as well. Which means that in your bloodstream, in my bloodstream right now, unless I'm very, very careful and I don't have diabetes, my pancreas still produces insulin, I have a lot of glucose in my blood. And you might think, wow, glucose in your blood, it's not a bad thing, is it? We'll talk about why it's a bad thing in the upcoming lectures. It actually causes damage to different organs, especially your eyes as well as your kidneys. You might develop peripheral neuropathy, and all of these are really deleterious to your health. And of course, cardiovascular disease. Now I'm going to come back to this slide. So this is a slide that you should be marking down as one of your 3 slides from this lecture. This is a slide that we're going to be taking apart in more detail on Friday and again next week. So we're going to be looking at all of these different physiological organ systems. Your brain is one, your muscle is another, your liver, adipose tissue, one of those cytokine deposits that we'll be looking at in greater detail. Your immune system is affected by becoming overweight, from going to being a nice lean individual with a nice normal BMI from somewhere around 20 to being obese where your BMI is now at 30, means that you are going to change all of these different organ systems. And these organ systems are going to be affected in a number of different ways. If you were to take a look at this on the right, on this side as a whole, what one thing in common do you see in and among the different organ systems that are listed up here for you? One or two different things. All you're doing is accumulating fat. All you're doing is increasing your metabolic syndrome status. But what else is happening to the rest of your body? Anything popping out at you? Yes. Hormonal imbalances. Okay, that's one. Absolutely. Anything else? Yes. Your immune system. What about your immune system? It is actually attacking your body, but how does your immune system attack your body? There are a number of ways. What's one way that you see up here? Things that you see like TNF alpha or interleukins. What are those? So these are cytokines. Your inflammatory markers are going up, and these are mechanisms that we'll encounter throughout this course. As we'll talk about on Friday, you might not think that these are related at all, but being obese actually has a consequence of you developing Alzheimer's later on. And some of you will have heard that we have an epidemic in terms of obesity, and some of you will also have heard that Alzheimer's disease is this sort of silent growing disorder, and maybe these two things are linked together. And again, there's lots of evidence to show, by the way, if you are changing your diet, it's never too late to stop. You don't have this slide, you don't need this slide, but this is a paper that came out earlier this morning that showed that if you reverse, if you lose weight, all of the bad things that happen when you start gaining weight actually can be reversed. But there's one caveat. Can you think of that one caveat, that one thing that you have to do to reverse everything? Can I wait till I'm 65? Probably not, right? So you have to do this early on. And these are things that we'll talk about in more detail on Friday. If you are at increased risk now, if you develop metabolic syndrome at a young age, you are more and more likely to develop Alzheimer's, etc., at an earlier age than people normally get Alzheimer's. But you can also reverse it, and you can also bring it back. So eating involves a number of different things. There's basic physiology, there's psychology, there's social factors. You're more likely to eat if you're with a bunch of friends. You're more likely to eat if you're checking Facebook and you see someone else eating something that looks really good. You're more likely to visit that restaurant. There are a number of behavioral adaptations as well, not just physiological responses. We don't eat now because we're hungry, and we'll come back to hunger and the physiological processes in the next little while, but there are some really complex variables to go along with this. Those of you who are taking nutrition, just on the right, and again, you don't have to memorize all of the details that are outlined here for you. What is this on the right? Nutrition, yes? It's a calorimeter. It is a bomb calorie counter where you burn food. So what's there on the left for you? And it's a little hard to make out. It's okay if you're wrong, by the way. Any ideas? Marshmallows. And what are you doing with those marshmallows? You're roasting them. And have you ever roasted marshmallows? What happens if you stick marshmallows into the fire? It burns. Food burns, right? Sugar burns. That is the whole basis for why we eat. We burn our food. Sugar likes to burn, and burning in a calorimeter, as you see here, and changing the temperature of water by 1 degree, it lets us know how many calories are in food. So it only takes 3,500 excess calories to make 1 pound of fat. So normally, at your age, at your sort of physical activity status, usually you need about 1,600 to about 2,200 calories per day. And let me tell you about my perfect experiment. It was a perfect experiment. I did this experiment and it works incredibly well. Don't do this experiment. Um, how many of you have ever eaten at McDonald's? Oh, I don't believe that. Okay. I'm sure some of you have eaten at McDonald's. Um, what do you think is the least sort of the worst? What is the sort of best of the worst that you can eat at McDonald's? Salad? Okay. I hadn't thought of salad, sorry. Um, so I did my research online. So I checked it out and I said, wow, you know what? I want to actually see, is this true? So if I continue my normal physical status and I want to gain 1 pound of weight, can I actually add 500 calories per day over a period of time and keep my normal physical activity, also eat whatever else I've been eating, and I just eat one extra food? Can I actually gain 1 pound by having 3,500 extra calories or 500 calories extra per day for 7 days? Can I actually gain 1 pound of fat? And what did I eat? Sorry? No. What did I eat? Cheeseburger. A cheeseburger has 500 calories. So again, just comparison, a small bag of chips has about 155 versus 230 for a slice of pizza. This small iced tea will have 48 calories. A cheeseburger has 500. So if I ate an extra cheeseburger, and I did, and it was delicious, for 7 days, did I gain a pound of extra weight? I did. And it was great, except I couldn't take it off. I still can't take it off. I've actually expanded beyond that sort of extra pound. And that, again, is part of the problem because it is a behavioral trait now. It becomes an issue. Is this something that I can correct? I actually have a really, really hard time not craving. As I'm standing here right now, you can sort of hear that I'm kind of drooling at the back of my mouth, thinking of that delicious cheeseburger, that greasy cheeseburger. Yes, I just swallowed my spit. Um, is it behavioral? Some of it is. Are there some consequences? Can we change this, do you think? Can we change the way that we eat? Can we change Canada as a whole? How many of you say yes? We can. Yes? Yes, we can. Good. How could we do this? Again, thinking just beyond the biology into a wider sphere. How would you, as a policymaker, because some of you might be interested in policy, how are you going to make Canada not be obese? Where do we get a lot of sugar? From soft drinks. And so when Mexico did this, and Mexico did a sugar tax, Mexico actually dropped the number of soft drinks that were sold, and it increased the amount of water that was sold. This was reported in the British Medical Journal last week, and it actually shows that you can behaviorally change a whole population, not you, not me, but an entire population, simply by changing the way in which we look at the problem. And we'll talk a little bit more about this on Friday. Again, if you can, check out the links that are available from today's lecture. Hopefully the YouTube link will work for you, as well as some of the other links. And if you have any other suggestions, please feel free to let me know about those as well. And by the way, there are still 3 drinks up here at the front. No, I won't judge. Feel free. Hi. Yeah. Can I I'll just turn this off and I'll set things up. Yeah. Professor, can I take one? Thank you. Hopefully that works.